In the Black Rose McQueen, I wanted to give a shout out to Ring IQ Boxing, and remember to tune in to the motherfucking relay.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Ebony Bridges.
Yes.
I think she wants to be signed by you, mate.
We're talking. I've actually made her an offer. I've got another fight with her anyway, but I would like to extend that. I mean, you know, she caused a lot of views, headlines. But
Turned a lot of heads.
Yeah, but the thing is, for cutting all that to the side, she put up a great fight. Talk about women's boxing. When there's hype for that, and when there's all this talk about, oh, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't wear that. But if they would have got in there and it would have been poor, it really actually would have affected women's boxing. So I feel like they had a lot of pressure on their shoulders because everyone's waiting, aren't they, to criticise or moan. Wanted to wear underwear at the weigh-in. Oh, this is a joke. Oh, but actually it went the other way and it was so good. A lot of people watched it. A lot of people engaged in the build-up. A lot of people interacted and a lot of people were excited for that fight. That's how you're going to increase the money, because it comes down to, and I keep saying this is the Claressa Shields effect, right? Just because you are an undisputed two-weight world champion in women's boxing, it doesn't mean you make the same money as an undisputed male fighter if your value is different, right? Claressa Shields has huge value. She's a huge name, but as of yet, she doesn't draw the numbers of an undisputed two-weight male champion. When they do, they must be paid the same. That's equality, right? And I don't go too deep about women's boxing money and men's boxing money. It's just how much is that fight worth to the card? How many tickets does that sell? How many subscribers does that drive? That's how you represent the value of a fight.
And to that, Amanda Serrano had this to say via her Twitter account. She said, "This is straight out of Eddie Hearn's mouth. Is there any other female fighter that Katie can fight that fans want to see more than her and I? Until then, I'll continue to fight the biggest fights in my division and hope he's being honest about what he says when he never said anything about Amanda Serrano. He never said anything about her versus Katie Taylor in that entire soundbite. That entire soundbite was not about Amanda Serrano. It was about Ebony Bridges, Shannon Courtenay, and Claressa Shields, and what the real driving force behind revenue in the sport of boxing is. But at no point in that conversation with Michelle Joy Phelps did he mention Amanda Serrano. Now, Lou DiBella, Amanda Serrano's promoter, he quickly co-signed her sentiments as well, saying, "Wow, Eddie, and I agree, but Eddie wasn't talking to you guys."
He literally wasn't.
Now, you have to remember that this all went down on Twitter. And on Twitter, there are no shortage of opinions from the fight fans themselves. One fight fan said, "You're an amazing fighter, and definitely in my top 3 pound for pound. I'd love to see you fight Katie Taylor, and I think the whole world would. I know you said Eddie needs to offer you the fight with the right money, but why can't your team offer the fight?" To which Amanda replied, "I'm a natural 126-pounder. They want me to fight her at her weight and her titles. Why would my team pay to fight someone at their weight? Do you know boxing?" To which this spenny person replied, "You always move up and down in weight, haha. It's a mega fight, mega money, and the bank for yous both. She's already earning over $1 million for her fights. You deserve to as well." One very spirited boxing fan that goes by the name Base the Kid responded to Amanda's tweet by saying, "You can't very publicly break a signed contract, cancel, duck the fight, then act as if you're the one being avoided from the fight taking place. You're a tremendous fighter, but our memories aren't that short, social media era or not." I want to say that the door is not completely closed for this fight. I want to say that boxing being the way that it is, there's still a possibility that it could happen, but what the probability of that possibility is, what it is exactly, well, that's something else entirely.
Puerto Rican champ Serrano, Amanda Serrano, would you push to make that fight happen?
Against Serrano?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that fight was obviously scheduled a couple of times last year at some point. Obviously, it didn't materialize for whatever reason, but I was obviously training for the fight a few times and believing that I was going to step into the ring against Serrano, but I would absolutely love that fight. It's obviously a fight that a lot of people look forward to. She's a great fighter, and that is a genuine 50-50 fight, I think. So I would love that fight.
A foul word in reference to Amanda Serrano and the way things went down between her and Katie never actually left Katie Taylor's mouth. And on the face of it, you might think that, maybe the fight is a possibility. I mean, Katie still seems to want it, but the reality of it is Amanda is just one of many options that Katie Taylor has beyond the Natasha Jonias fight. And that's assuming Natasha doesn't upset her. That's a possibility as well. If Katie beats Natasha, it's conceivable that after that, she'll move up and wait and take on Jessica McCaskill in a rematch for all the belts at welterweight.
That's if she beats Natasha.
And if she doesn't beat Natasha, if Natasha upsets her, it's conceivable that they'll go into an immediate rematch. Lou DiBella and Amanda Serrano might be telling themselves that they bring more value to a Taylor fight than anybody else, but I don't know how true that is, because it's not like Amanda is bringing a belt that Katie Taylor can fight for and win the way that Jessica McCaskill is.
They're not.
Comparatively, I'd have to say I think Katie Taylor gets the same amount of money for a Serrano fight that she'd get for a Jonas fight.
How many of Amanda's fans are going to buy a ticket?
How many of Amanda Serrano's fans are going to do what they got to do to be there? Consider the reaction that the Natasha Jonas versus Terry Harper fight got. A fight that a lot of people tuned in for, a fight that a lot of people watched. And compare that to the Amanda Serrano versus Daniela Bermudez fight, which took place very recently. What was the viewership for that fight like versus the viewership of Jonas versus Harper? This is a numbers game, after all. This is all about metrics.
I looked for the Serrano versus Bermudez numbers,
And I couldn't find them, though the same applies. That's what a promoter like Eddie Hearn is going to be looking at when he's gauging the value of one fight, one opponent option, versus another. That's what he's going to look at.
He's also going to look at what the fighters want.
Vaguely recall Amanda Serrano saying that she wants 40%. She wants a 60-40 split for a Katie Taylor fight. And the problem with wanting a 60-40 split of a Katie Taylor fight is you have to account for that 40% that you want. You've got to be good for it. And here today, I don't think Amanda's good for 40% of a Taylor fight.
Katie's going to make what Katie's going to make with or without you.
But are you going to make that without her? Bear in mind, there are still a lot of fight fans that haven't soon forgotten how things went between Katie and Amanda when they were supposed to fight last year. There are a lot of people out there that haven't forgiven Amanda Serrano for walking away from the Taylor fight, regardless of what her reasons were, because to a lot of people, just looks like a plain old duck. And here today in 2021, it looks like she's still using the name of Katie Taylor to get attention that she can't get on her own.
I'm just giving it to you straight.
Because it's the only way I know how to give it to you. If Amanda Serrano is currently enthralled in the process of trying to unify the featherweight division, why is Katie Taylor still a subject? Her and Lou DiBella, they injected themselves into that conversation, that soundbite from Eddie Hearn, where Eddie didn't mention them. He was talking about Ebony Bridges, he was talking about Shannon Courtenay, he was talking about Claressa Shields. But what he wasn't talking about was Taylor versus Serrano.
There's a lot of people that are really pissed off with Amanda.
I can't tell you that the door is completely closed for Taylor versus Serrano. It's still possible. It's just a question of how probable is possible. What are we talking about? What's the likelihood of the fight happening? Because Katie Taylor's going to continue to make what Katie Taylor's been making with or without Amanda. And she has no shortage of options. Even beyond the Natasha Jonas fight. She's still got a rematch with Jessica McCaskill. She could take on Chantel Cameron.
She's got mandatories for every one of those belts she's holding.
And she can keep busy with any one of them. Her adoring public won't bat an eyelash. She'll continue to make what she's been making, with or without Amanda. So you really have to ask yourself that even if the fight is still a possibility, what is the probability of the fight happening? And to that, I'll say, not hold my breath. Other news, the world is reacting to Jake Paul's big knockout win over Ben Askren, an experienced mixed martial artist who is very much out of place in the squared circle, and who really knows how much of Ben's time and attention actually went into attempting to train for this fight in order to win this fight when he got dropped off the first big right hand that landed. And he is in many ways supposed to be a more experienced and conditioned fighter than young Jake Paul.
He is.
I mean, that bit of it, that's not subject to opinion. That's a simple matter of fact, that in the realm of combat, be it wrestling, striking, kickboxing, or boxing, Ben Askren has been in there with more experienced fighters, just in a different decorum, in a very different setting. So one would expect that he'd be able to weather the blow of a novice boxer like a Jake Paul, but, he really wasn't able to. And if I'm being honest, his physical condition seemed like the condition of a guy that wasn't taking this situation all that seriously. I'm going to tell you something. Jake Paul already has his own audience. Before he decided to set foot in a boxing ring, he already had a legion of followers. And those are the followers that are most interested in whatever he's doing, though he has managed to get some of the boxing world's attention for better or worse. And the question is, where is this going? What is this all building up to? What is it all about?
What?
Because near as I can tell, it seems like a kid who already had a lot of money, using that money to live out his fantasies. Is it really wrong for Jake Paul to take on YouTubers and basketball players and mixed martial artists who really just
So not a box?
know one particular element of combat? In the case of Ben Askren, wrestling. That was supposed to be that guy's strong suit. But is there really something wrong or unethical in what he's doing? And if I'm being honest and objective, the answer is no. Because your average professional boxer, in their first 3 to 4 to even 5 fights, they're not taking on killers. They're not taking on world-class, world-level opponents. Your average run-of-the-mill boxer that goes pro in their first 4 to 5 to even 10 fights is facing a lot of no-hopers. A lot of guys that are only intended to go in there with them and give them experience and not much else. It's quite uncommon to put a boxer,
A novice boxer.
in the early stages of their careers, in high-risk, low-reward situations. Of course not. It doesn't happen. So in that way, Jake Paul isn't doing something that we haven't seen and don't see all the time. I mean, look at your favorite fighters' first 5 or 6 fights, and you tell me, how much chance did their opponents stand of beating them? About the same as Ben Askren's chances of beating Jake Paul. Behind closed doors, a lot of us hoped that Ben Askren would be able to upset the plans for Jake so that these novelty acts and circus shows could come to an abrupt end. I have to admit, I was one of those people, but Jake seems to be taking things serious, or at least more serious than Ben was. I don't really think you can make a lot of excuses for Ben Askren, if I'm being honest. Ben Askren, who looks like he just showed up for a paycheck and not much else. That being said, if this is to escalate, if there is going to be progression and Jake Paul wishes for the boxing community at large to view him as a boxer in the light that they view other boxers in, then one fight, at least one fight, that I can recommend is a Tommy Fury fight, because Tommy ain't got that many more fights than Jake. Tommy doesn't have all this wealth of experience, amateur or professional, that would make it an uneven contest between himself and Jake Paul. I think that's a fight that makes a lot of sense, if I'm being honest. Instead of fighting undersized YouTubers and basketball players with no background in combat, instead of facing wrestlers in a boxing ring as opposed to a cage or an octagon or whatever the fuck they call it,
Octopus?
why not take on Tommy Fury? He's got a following of his own that is not limited to the boxing community. I think that's a fight that makes sense in the near future. If Jake Paul wants people to view him as a boxer in the boxer sense of the word, then he needs to start fighting boxers. Otherwise, he's just some rich kid with enough money to live out his fantasies, however morbid they might be.
There's a question as to where all of this is going.
At minimum, what I can tell you, as a boxing fan, is that I'm not going to view Jake Paul as a boxer, a real boxer, until he starts fighting real boxers. And no, he doesn't have to be in over his head. It doesn't have to be an uneven contest. It can be him and another guy who's 3-0, 4-0, or 5-0. It can be that kind of a situation, but I won't view him as a boxer of any kind until he starts fighting boxers.
And I don't know if that's what he wants people to do.
I don't know if it's acceptance that he's seeking from the boxing community. I just know that he's not going to get it until he starts boxing actual boxers.
Till then, his fights are just going to seem like a bunch of circus acts and freak shows.
Till he starts boxing actual boxers. Now, the rift between mixed martial arts and boxing fans has been set ablaze yet again for this
circus
meeting of the worlds. Ben Askren, his area of expertise really is in the octagon, whereas, Jake Paul is attempting to be a boxer of some kind. I'll tell you the truth. I honestly feel like this is a bad advertisement for the sport of mixed martial arts, because we're to believe that Ben Askren and other MMA fighters like him have to prepare themselves for more than just jabs and right hands, right crosses, left hooks, uppercuts. We're to believe that mixed martial artists have to prepare themselves for more than just strikes with those two extremities. That in the sport of mixed martial arts, they're allowed to use all of their extremities, their legs included. And there's grappling, and there's wrestling. These are things you gotta worry about. And we're to believe that Ben Askren and fighters like him, other fighters like him, they have to prepare themselves for more than just punches. But I saw Ben Askren get dropped by the first hard right hand that landed, and it wasn't coming from an actual fighter. It wasn't coming from an actual boxer. It's a question of Ben Askren being removed from his natural element. His natural element, all that really is in the octagon, not the squared circle. But should he seem so far removed when we're to believe MMA fighters have to prepare themselves for everything? Should he really seem like that big a fish out of water? Not against a boxer, a real boxer, but a YouTuber with a record of what? 2-0 against a basketball player and another video vlogger like himself?
That's why it's a bad advertisement for MMA.
I think the guy's got a record of what, 19 wins and 2 losses or something like that? Maybe more? I'm not sure. But I'm looking this guy up and I'm thinking to myself, how could a guy with this much experience in the octagon, where you not only have to prepare yourself for punches, you also got to prepare yourself for kicks and headlocks and joint locks and what have you. How could a guy like that look so out of place in a boxing ring when we're supposed to believe that MMA fighters have to prepare for more than just boxing, for more than just strikes with your hands? It doesn't really make sense. And that's why it's a bad advertisement for mixed martial arts. Now, I don't know how dedicated Ben was or wasn't to winning this shit show. I don't know that any of his time went into really training to beat Jake Paul. You know, Jake Paul didn't really do nothing special in there. He landed your basic jab right hand combination, the most common combination in all of boxing, your basic 1-2. And you're telling me that that basic 1-2
Jab right hand
from a YouTuber was too much for Ben Askren, an experienced mixed martial artist that has been in there in the octagon with other experienced mixed martial artists. You're telling me that that basic 1-2 from a YouTuber was too much for Ben? I'll tell you, that don't send the right message.
I think at minimum you expect them to be able to take it.
I think at minimum a lot of people expect that Ben should not only be able to take the shot, but anticipate it and counter in kind, because we're to believe mixed martial artists have to deal with more than just punches, but this guy couldn't deal with a basic 1-2.
From a YouTuber.
And that bit of it, that's in the back of a lot of people's minds right now. That's why this was not a good advertisement for mixed martial arts.
You would expect better of a mixed martial artist.
Shouldn't you?